Welcome back, Cubs. Direwolf here. And today, we're going to educate the young Turks on what a suppressor is. For a little bit of context, suppressors, often called silencers, are not illegal in the United States. However, they are highly regulated, expensive, and the process you must go through to be approved for owning one can take up to 9 months. Applications to own a suppressor go through the same government agency that processes requests for fully automatic rifles, even though they don't make weapons more dangerous like fully automatic does. And in this video, I will explain to the young Turks that the law being considered to remove the prohibitive restrictions on the ownership of suppressors will not raise crime rates and will not aid criminals, but will make firearms safer to use and will help protect police officers, hunters, and those who wish to defend themselves, as well as significantly reducing the tax dollar cost of having to regulate these items unnecessarily. But most importantly, removing these restrictions on repressors will be removing an arbitrary and unconstitutional barrier, an infringement upon Americans' rights to bear arms. But before I go into more detail, let's see what the young Turks have to say on the topic.
A GOP lawmaker is reviving legislation that would essentially legalize silencers in the United States.
They're already legal, and they're not called silencers for a reason. They do not make guns silent. Unlike how suppressors are portrayed in movies, they do not make firearms whisper quiet. On average, suppressors reduce the noise of a gunshot by 20 to 35 decibels, the same reductions you'd get from earplugs or earmuffs. This would make a shot from a 9mm handgun still as loud as a thunderclap, and a 9mm handgun is not even close to as loud or powerful of a firearm that an American could own. Many are far louder, and any criminal could achieve the same sound reduction by using a pillow instead of a suppressor.
Now, silencers are currently legal, but an individual who wants to obtain them has to go through quite a bit of obstacles in order to do so.
These people already had to go through a background check to buy a firearm in the first place. The additional paperwork, background check, fingerprinting, and cost do not prevent criminals from buying suppressors. Criminals who already cannot buy a legal firearm would just buy it on the black market anyway. Who knows, maybe they'll just buy some of Obama's Fast and Furious firearms. In the end, all these laws do is make it difficult for law-abiding citizens to buy suppressors.
And part of the reason why is because silencers silence guns.
Silencers, also known as suppressors, do not silence guns. Do you think a thunderclap nearby is silent? And that's for a firearm fired outside. For a firearm fired inside, it's much louder. The only conceivable reasons that you would say that a silencer or suppressor makes a firearm silent is because you've never fired one and you believe how they are portrayed in movies is reality. You do realize that movies are works of fiction, right? They're not firing actual suppressed rifles.
And they're oftentimes used by criminals.
Wrong again. The ATF confirmed that silencers are rarely used in crimes despite their explosion in popularity. Coincidentally, suppressor ownership in the United States has raised by 30% in the last year. But in the same period, there was no rise in suppressor-related crime. The agency has only recommended prosecutions of 44 silencer-related crimes per year for the last decade. That means only roughly 0.003% of silencers are used in crimes each year. Of those 44 crimes per year, only 6 involve defendants with prior felony conviction. And not all of those crimes are violent crimes. Simply unlawfully possessing a suppressor is one such crime. The ATF Associate Deputy Director Ronald Turk argued that silencers should be deregulated due to their low rate at which they are used in crimes. He wrote, "Consistent with our low number of prosecution referrals, silencers are very rarely used in criminal shootings. Given the lack of criminality associated with silencers, it is reasonable to conclude that they should not be viewed as a threat to public safety, necessitating National Firearms Act classification and should be considered for classification under the Gun Control Act, which would have them classified as any other firearm or accessory." So to put it simply, dumb Turks, out of the many thousands of people shot every year, very few of them are shot with silencers. And out of all the many silencers owned in America, very few of them are ever used in a crime. This is partly due to the fact that they make the barrel of the gun longer and harder to conceal, and also because they do not make firearms silent. So it does not greatly help a criminal get away with their crimes.
So making them widely available is probably not the best idea.
Yes, it is a good idea, and here's why. First, as I've shown you, increased suppressor ownership has not resulted in increased crime rates with suppressors. So there's been no negative effect, but here's what suppressors are good for, what they provide to our community. The most important thing is they reduce the damage that shooting a firearm does to the shooter and everyone around them. People who have concealed carried firearms don't also have ear protection. If you are forced to defend yourself, pulling that trigger will cause permanent damage to your ears and everyone else around you, including your family and children. And if you are in your house, in a building, or in a car, that damage will be compounded. You should not have to permanently damage your hearing or the hearing of those around you to defend yourself. They also reduce the recoil on a firearm, making it more accurate and easy to shoot, making it easier to defend yourself. They also would reduce the sound pollution produced by local firing ranges and add an extra layer of protection to high-powered hunting rifles.
Now, Representative Jeff Duncan had originally presented this bill, but after the shooting involving Representative Scalise, they decided to kind of retire it for a little while, and now they're bringing it back.
Coincidentally, the shooter was a Democrat who was radicalized by dishonest, misleading, doomsday-style rhetoric from media sources such as you, the Young Turks. And I'd also like to point out that that assassin that you helped create did not use a suppressor.
Now, Duncan introduced the silencer provision in a broader bill known as the Sportsman Heritage and Recreational Enhancement Act, or SHARE Act.
Because assassins are sportsmen, so, you know.
Well, Chunk, the approximately 1.5 million privately owned suppressors are predominantly owned by sportsmen. And I've already gone over how only a tiny fraction of that number are ever used in crimes. For instance, Chicago has had a lot of bloodshed, including 762 homicides and more than 3,500 shootings just last year. But silencers figured into little to none of the shootings. A spokesman for the Chicago Police Department told me that we seldom recover silencers. Sometimes we may recover a makeshift silencer, but even those are rare. And if you're thinking of the reason that American criminals don't use suppressors is because they're so highly regulated, you'd be wrong. In the UK, firearms are heavily regulated, but you can own a rifle for hunting, protection, and sport. However, suppressors are sold over the counter and are not regulated or serialized. So in the UK, suppressors are very easy to get a hold of, and yet at the same time, they don't have a huge problem of assassins using them to kill people. Because in the UK, just like in America, the vast majority of suppressor owners use them to protect their hearing while they're sport shooting, hunting, or protecting their property. In fact, the UK is a great case study showing the deregulating of suppressors does not increase crime with suppressors.
Okay, so what is his argument in favor of the silencers? Because here's the reality. Law enforcement against legalizing or making these silencers easier to obtain.
That is false. I've already quoted police officers saying that suppressors are not a problem. In fact, some police departments recognize the need for suppressors themselves. To prevent hearing loss, a few progressive law enforcement agencies have equipped their patrol officers with suppressed AR platforms. The Tampa Police Department was a leader in the area in 2008 when they started to equip their patrol rifles with suppressors. A large agency in Southern California is now considering allowing AR-equipped officers to purchase their own suppressors with their primary intent of preventing hearing loss. In fact, now that many patrol officers are commonly equipped with an AR platform, these officers and their trainers have identified a valid concern of high-frequency decimal gunfire generated by these weapons. The basic 18-inch M16 or M4 produces about 160 to 165 decibels of peak noise. This is especially concerning in a confined space such as a police car, urban business building, or residence, because that high decibel muzzle blast is reflected and increased with multiple shots fired. And any exposure to a noise over 140 decibel causes immediate and irreparable hearing loss, according to the National Institute of Occupational Safety and Health. So not only do many police not see suppressors as a problem, many police officers want to use them also, which is just further proof that suppressors are not made for assassins and criminals, but they're made for anyone who wants to use their firearm more safely.
Right?
Blue lives matter.
Chunk, don't pretend for a moment that you care about the lives of any police officers. You who have a history of supporting BLM and Antifa and degrading the police on a pretty regular basis have no right to pretend now that you suddenly support them when you're trying to use that to support your flawed argument. But since you brought it up, yes, blue lives do matter, and that's why they deserve to have suppressors. In the same way that all lives matter, and that everyone who can legally own a gun should be allowed to buy a suppressor, without arbitrary and prohibitive regulation.
Okay, so
Blue lives matter.
Cops don't like it. It's used by really bad guys out there, criminals.
Wrong again. Police officers like them and use them. You're not calling police officers really bad guys, are you? The fact of the matter is, very few criminals use suppressors.
So what's his reasoning? He's like, well, you know, the thing is, these hunters go out there, they're hunting, it's loud, and I really want to make sure I protect their hearing. I kid you not, that is the excuse that he's giving, which is unbelievable.
Maybe it's hard for you to believe because you've never fired a rifle before, and the only thing you know about suppressors is what you've seen in movies. You don't seem to understand the difference between fiction and reality. Suppressors do not make firearms silent, and they're not only used by contract killers.
And by the way, this isn't just a Republican thing. There are 4 Democrats who have co-sponsored this legislation. I'll give you their names in just a second.
It should really tell you something that these people who agree with you on most things, but actually own firearms and know how they work, that they disagree with you on this. Maybe they know something you don't.
But you know, I'm also concerned about ear protection for hunters, which is why I would recommend this.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, that looks good. Or this.
Or get Beats or something.
Or here's another one. Let's take a look. All right, here's a hunter modeling one of these devices.
People who have to defend themselves with firearms don't usually walk around all day with hearing protection. Also, a silencer protects the hearing of everyone around you, not just yourself. And lastly, hunters with high-powered rifles are suggested to have 2 layers of protection: the silencer and their earmuffs. Again, you have no idea what you are talking about.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, looks like his ears are safe. Okay, we're earmuffing the hunters. Okay, look, here's the thing. This is nonsense.
Yes, everything you've said and every argument you've made has been without evidence and thus is nonsense. Just because you do not understand and are irrationally afraid of suppressors, that is not a good reason for you to limit the rights of others to own them.
And in terms of the Democrats who have supported this, you have Representative Gene Green from Texas, Representative Henry Weller from Texas, Representative Colin Peterson, Representative Peter DeFazio.
And I say the people from their states, from both sides of the political spectrum, should be thanking them today for standing up for our constitutional rights.
The part of the story that amazes me actually is, as Anna pointed out, it's not, we're America. It's not like you can't buy a silencer if you want to assassinate someone. You can.
Chunk, how do I get this through your head? Suppressors are not made for assassins.
We believe in weapons, all sorts of weapons. It just takes you a little longer.
It takes longer, it's more intrusive, and costs a lot more money. And it shouldn't, because it is a constitutional right that we have the ability to buy these items.
So what the government says is, hey, you know what? You got to submit for fingerprints and take a photograph in order to purchase a silencer, and it might take all the way up to 9 months. Now, the people who don't want to be fingerprinted and have their picture taken when they're buying a silencer are the people who are usually going to murder someone.
Even people who are not criminals don't like being registered in government databases. But that isn't the only barrier to why people don't buy suppressors. The artificially high price is a far more of a barrier that affects lower income people, but does not affect criminals who will just buy the same suppressors on the black market, if they really wanted one. Though, history shows, most criminals don't use them.
Weapons are generally like, they're quiet. Firearms are really loud to where the headphones just don't work.
First off, firearms are weapons. And I don't know if this guy's being sarcastic, but he is correct. Headsets are not enough to protect your ears from high-powered rifles.
So all of our good Americans who carry firearms for protection and hunting purposes, I mean, they're so loud in their ears, it doesn't happen. So they need silencers for their things because they're cooler Americans. It's a toy thing is all it is. You know how much cooler it is if you have a gun with a silencer on it and you show off to your friends, hey, check this out. Yeah, I'm cool.
If that is how you view firearms, you should not own them. They are not a status symbol and they are not a toy. They are both a weapon and a tool. And a suppressor is a component that makes that weapon safer and more effective.
No, but Jared is exactly right. They saw it in the movies. They want to buy another cool toy. And I hear you, brother. When I hear the movie, you know what? I might even have it here. Okay, it sounds cool.
Does it?
I think so. Okay, I'm going to keep it real.
Sounds like a struggling fart. That's what it sounds
Okay, all right, fair enough. That's your interpretation.
Okay.
And you want to buy those toys, and the manufacturers want to sell those toys, but sometimes those toys are used by really dangerous men, and sometimes to kill cops.
And sometimes they're used by cops to kill very dangerous men. And the vast majority of the times they're used by law-abiding citizens to protect their own lives, their property, and to hunt. And the fact is, very few people use suppressors to commit crimes. And just because a very small number of people abuse their rights to own suppressors, it doesn't mean that right should be taken away from anyone else. And just because you watched movies where scary assassins use silencers, it does not mean they are made for assassins or that they're even commonly used by criminals. Young Turks, you've formed your entire argument about the feelings you have about silencers and no evidence. And in the end, we all know you're not arguing in good faith, because we know from your previous videos, you don't care about suppressed firearms. You don't believe Americans have the right to own firearms at all. You do not care about the public's safety, because the law that you oppose is designed to protect the public, and there is no evidence it will do otherwise. You are liars, charlatans, and frauds. Direwolf out. Hey Cubs, I hope you liked the video. If you did, please hit the like, subscribe, and if you want to support my channel monetarily, please check out my Patreon, linked below. Thank you very much, Cubs. Have a great day.